You're listening to the Renegade Blitz, the best podcast for Steelers fans by Steelers fans. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, at RBlitzPod, and at Blitz Videos. Read articles on RenegadeBlitz.com, like us on Facebook, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app.
And welcome back to the Renegade Blitz podcast. I'm Ty Polk with Chris Ward and Brandon Walker. Glad to be back with you post Minicamp talk, and we're glad to have on Chris Carter, the host of the Locked On Steelers podcast, and also now has a new job title as he's a writer at Steelers Now. Chris, congratulations on the new endeavors, and welcome back to the show, man.
Thanks for having me, fellas. Always fun to be here.
So, of course, the big thing whenever you mention with the Steelers and the, post-Ben Roethlisberger era is the quarterback battle. All reports are now seemingly putting Mitch Trubisky as the favorite to start in week one. And then after that, for QB2, it's really been Mason Rudolph still. So do you feel that this job is Trubisky's to lose?
QB1, I think so right now. Yeah. I mean, the Steelers want to make it an open, competition. Mitch Trubisky's taken all the QB1 reps. He has 50 starts in the NFL. He has a winning record. He has, that's 5 times as many starts as Mason Rudolph. We all know Kenny Pickett, though, being a rookie, they're excited about him. Mike Tomlin, don't just throw rookies into the fire like that unless it's absolutely necessary. Like Dan Moore last year, it was just, hey, it worked out that way with the injury situation that they had. But I think right now, Mitch Trubisky, there's a lot of people that are thinking, oh man, why did they draft Kenny Pickett if they were going to sign Mitch Trubisky or vice versa? I don't understand that line of thinking when it's like, look, you don't know if Kenny Pickett's going to work out right away. You hope you do, but there's times guys need time off to get used to the NFL. Josh Allen needed time off to get used to it. Patrick Mahomes needed time to get used to it. And those are two of the biggest things in the NFL right now. And that's when it comes to quarterbacking. So it made sense to go get a Mitch Trubisky, a guy who's more experienced than Mason Rudolph. And I think you've got an interesting mix of quarterbacks in the room. You got Chris Oladipo, as your fourth guy who's going to be practice squad, working from there. But Mason Rudolph, only quarterback who knows the playbook from last year. Kenny Pickett, rookie, hungry, looking to prove himself. And a guy that you love because you saw him for 5 years in the pit locker room, and then Mitch Trubisky, who has the most NFL experience of all of them. That's an interesting mix. I think it's definitely Mitch's job to win. I don't think it's a bad thing for the Pittsburgh Steelers. In fact, I think it's a good thing that they got a veteran like him out on the market. And if things go sour, you got other options.
And Chris, this topic's kind of been trending lately. I saw Tim Benz wrote an article about it, and Andrew Filipponi has been talking about it too. Do you think it makes sense for Kenny Pickett to have, essentially a redshirt year, considering that the Steelers selected him in the first round and he's 24 years old?
Yes, that's what I was just talking about. Again, it's not some unseen thing that a quarterback gets drafted in the first round. Heck, there's guys drafted in the first round higher than 20th overall. That's it for a year. And I don't think that this is a necessary thing. When the Steelers drafted Kenny Pickett, there were the people, anyone who was out there saying, oh, wow, yeah, he's starting day one. You either A, weren't part of the Steelers, or B, were saying that for yourself. But the Steelers never said that was going to be the case. And anyone that knew the Steelers like that and was around the locker room all the time also knew that wasn't going to be the case. I said in the Locked On Steelers, like, Kenny Pickett is not the guaranteed starter. And I proposed the question as to get the discussion going on my show a few times. But each time I was like, Mitch is your number one starter at the start of the year. Now, if Mitch stalls out during the season, there will be a young quarterback who's ready to challenge him on the roster. And I certainly think that could be in the equation there. And that's something that I say, I think Pittsburgh Steelers fans have been used to Ben Roethlisberger for the past, 18 years. Whenever Ben started to fail, you didn't take him out of the game unless he got hurt. You kept him in the game. Even when you do 5 interceptions, you let him fight his way through it. That's what you do with a franchise quarterback who's been your guy. Mitch Trubisky won't have that kind of a leash. If things go really bad, if Mason Rudolph's still on the roster, they might give him a shot. If Kenny Pickett's the number 2 quarterback, they'll give him a shot. But it's not a situation where, again, that they changed up anything at the last minute. This was always Mitch Trubisky. When they signed him, they said, hey, this is going to be QB1. Kenny Pickett, you're coming in. If you earn it, great. But there was never a guarantee or even a thought in my mind that he was definitely, or he was guaranteed to get that number 1 spot before the season started or anything like that.
I think the one thing that everybody kind of got mixed up with in terms of making Pickett the starter immediately was the age. I mean, you're usually used to a quarterback coming in like 21, 22. Roethlisberger came in at 22. But it's just that, look, when he's ready, he's ready.
Right. Oh, sorry. I thought you were keep going.
Nah, we'll move on to Brandon.
No, we're going to go here. Najee Harris got the weight, got the thighs, quads, everything. Quadzilla workhorse last year. Do you think they should decrease their workload with him? He had 381 last season. And then who will be the number 2 back in your opinion? Benny Snell, McFarland.
Well, for one, yes, they should decrease his workload. And Najee Harris even said as much to us when he was at Minicamp. He said that, he's like, they're going to decrease my touches. And he said he doesn't want that. He wants more. He wants to increase his touches. That's the kind of character that he is. He wants to put the ball in his hands. He wants to be the playmaker that's going to make plays for his team. But the Steelers also know that they don't want to wear him down so fast. So I really think that this is a situation where, Najee Harris, they're going to find a way to split it out. Right now, Benny Snell is the number 2 back. I know that's going to tick off a lot of Steelers fans who are like, he didn't do well enough. I will say he has gotten better at pass protection. And I think that if the Steelers offensive line can take steps forward, it'll help Benny Snell. But this is going to be a serious training camp for Benny. He hasn't had the kind of first few seasons in the NFL that, give off the confidence in him to say like, hey, you know what? You could be the dude that, is our number 2 guy. If the Steelers don't like what's going on there, they'll make a move. But this is how the Steelers operate. Much like how, y'all remember how they went and got Joe Schobert in the middle of preseason last year? It was a similar thing. They gave Robert Spillane a chance to win the linebacker job. Didn't feel like he had done that, so they went and traded and got Joe Schobert. I can see a similar thing happening if Benny Snell doesn't if they feel like Benny Snell doesn't win the number 2 running back spot and they want to get another veteran in the mix, in the middle of training camp. And moving and so forth. I also like Mateo Durant. I think that I think he was a heck of a player at Duke. I think that he could be a guy that works his way up the roster. I don't think it'll happen this year, but I think eventually if he fights through training camp and makes enough impressions on doing special teams and the little things like Benny Snell has grown into, because he's become a really good special teams contributor, that'll help his case. As far as Anthony McFarland, he just needs to be healthy. We haven't seen enough of him because he's been too hurt. So, if we want to see how all the different ways he's going to be used by in Matt Canada's offense, he's got to be on the field first. So if none of these guys step up in training camp, if we're not seeing anything that looks solidified, like, hey, you could take the load off of Najee, I'd expect the Steelers to be making some calls around some free agents or maybe even some light trades in the mix.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear who you think would be those targets for the Steelers, because when you think about it, you think of Najee Davenport and also D'Angelo Williams, who was that veteran running back presence out there with the young running back. In the case of Williams, it was Bell that was kind of spelling a little bit for the touches, and hopefully to take off the workload, but also in case of emergency of Harris getting injured, could also step in and be a good running back himself.
I mean, I think Justin Jackson's still out there on the free agent market. The tricky thing with that is that you never know what number 2 running back on some team is just going to be overvalued. There's going to be his value is going to be not as much as he's getting paid and then get let go. So it's tough for me to say right now who they would get because it could be one of those guys. It could be Jerick McKinnon. It could be Devontae Freeman. There's a lot of guys that are like in their mid 20s to early 30s. The Steelers could look at. Typically, when they go into free agency and they do something like this, they'll get a guy who's in their mid 20s or as close to to being off of their first contract in the NFL as possible. Wayne Gallman, I think, is still out there as a free agent at 27 years old. But again, if they get into this situation and they see that it's dire, I foresee this being a trade, and the trade could come from way too many directions for predictions to be really made at this point. I just think that there's there's options they're going to consider. But again, it's going to be about Benny Snell, I think. And Benny Snell, I think he knows the stakes that are up right now. He's worked really hard. I do think he's a little bit quicker this year. We'll see how that translates to the offense. And also, again, if the offensive line is getting better push, if the quarterbacks are able to hit some deeper passes than Ben Roethlisberger's been able to hit the last few years, I think that opens up the run game more and naturally just gives more space for the offensive line to work. And then in turn, Najee Harris and Benny Snell.
So let's talk about one of the big, free agency, at least in terms of trying to get paid as a Steeler right now, and that's Diontae Johnson. Mm-hmm. He's trying to lobby around for that $20 million a year that guys like A.J. Brown have picked up from Philadelphia and all that stuff. Me personally, I think if you could get him at $17 million, that's a way better deal with it. But do you think he does get that contract?
I think eventually he does. It might not be with the Steelers, but he's getting it. I ask you this, Ty. Are you basing that off of what wide receivers have been paid over the last few years, or is what puts it in your head that 17 mil is a good number for Diontae Johnson? This is not a critical question. I'm getting your thought process.
I think when it comes to Diontae Johnson, I cannot talk about his impact with it, and I do think the drops were kind of based off of, look, Ben Roethlisberger needed guys that were quick and could dart in there and make tough catches. And while Diontae, I think maybe it was just a bad situation with Ben at the time, but I do think that his elusiveness, his ability to create himself open as a wide receiver, that's important. And even with a new quarterback, they're going younger with that still. Anyone that can route themselves open, that's a big thing in this league. But when you look at the drops, all this stuff is inside. It's clear. He's the one Steelers wide receiver that when I look at is not a slot wide receiver when you think of it, but he has the slot wide receiver body. So it's a weird thing with him where I just got to see more if he's going to want this $20 million.
No, I hear you. And again, that wasn't a criticizing question. This is the reason why I asked this question. What we know, you, Todd, Brandon, Chris, all of us, what we think our wide receiver numbers aren't going to matter very soon. And I say this all the time on the Locked On Steelers podcast. The salary cap increase this year, it's increasing next year, it's increasing the year after that, and not by like 1 or 2 million. It's growing significant. So when you look at these numbers, what NFL GMs are trying to do, and I think a big reason why the Steelers really liked Omar Khan was because he was the numbers guy while also being a football guy under Kevin Colbert. They need to be able to predict how this market is going to go. They need to be able to fight to get the right kind of percentages and proportions for these contracts, because Christian Kirk got $18 million.
As someone that looks at Arizona as a secondary team, I don't know if he's worth that.
And again, he got that. Go ahead, Brandon.
I think that number, that's your starting point with the Steelers with Johnson.
But see, here's my thing.
That's what I think, that at least at bottom barrel.
Deontay Johnson, Christian Kirk in my book. I agree.
That we agree. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm trying to tell you, Chris. Like Chris Carter.
I got you.
Yeah, if he's getting 18. I mean, I'd say 19.
Hey, here's the numbers that I'll compare you to. The guys who make $20 million a year right now, Brandon Cooks is just below that at 19.8. Chris Godwin, Amari Cooper, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, DJ Moore. All those guys make roughly $20 million, a little above, a little below, around that range. I think Diontae Johnson, a guy who finished 10th in receiving yards last year, with the worst version of Ben Roethlisberger we ever saw, 6th in receptions, 6th in first downs achieved by wide receivers. To me, that is worth the $20-ish million range. And here's the other thing. It's not $20 million to us 4 years ago when AB was getting paid $18 million. It's a different number simply because the salary cap is going to be that much bigger. So $20 million is going to be, 5% of the salary cap versus, 8 or 10% of the salary cap, just going off random numbers there. But the point is that $20 million over the next 5 years is a completely different $20 million over the last 5 years.
So in terms of that, you have made me realize that, okay, that number was way too low and he wasn't going to accept that. So yeah, maybe 18, 19, 20 million. But of course, we're waiting for the shoe to drop with the one guy that's going to reset the entire market for wide receivers, and that's Deebo Samuel. Yeah. But Deebo Samuel does things that I think basically they should bring back the flex bone and just have him do stuff like that, because those orbit motions, he could do all that, and they're going to ask for wide receivers like that.
They are. And I think Deebo Samuel's versatility and his playmaking ability, fantastic. But, it's crazy. When people talk about Diontae Johnson's drops, you know who had the most drops in all of the NFL last year?
I think Samuel was among the top.
Deebo Samuel. Not only did he have the most drops, he had the highest drop percentage. This is all based off of Pro Football Focus's numbers. The thing that I have is when people talk about, Deontay's drops, he has a drop problem. And yes, at the end of the season, too many drops. Like, if you want to be primo, A-star, number one wide receiver and get that kind of money, you got to do better than that. But you compare it to, he had less drops than Tyreek Hill, Cooper Kupp, Monty Adams. There are a bunch of guys out there that are primo number one receivers that had more drops. Now, granted, they do other things than Diontae Johnson, but they also had different quarterbacks. If you put Diontae Johnson with Aaron Rodgers, I think his numbers skyrocket. You put him with Matt Stafford, I think his numbers skyrocket. I think that if you put Diontae Johnson with 2015 to 2016 to 2017 Ben Roethlisberger, his numbers skyrocket. He'd be a different receiver. It's just, you think of his first 3 years in the NFL. 2019, Mason, Duck. Meh. 2020, Ben Roethlisberger for about 8 weeks was really good until teams said, he's just throwing the short routes. Let's cover those. And then the Steelers were in trouble. 2021, just a struggling version of Ben Roethlisberger, who was great in getting the clutch play at the end of the game, but it was not that good of a quarterback through the rest of it. Give Diontae Johnson a quarterback who can play top 15, top 12 in the NFL. Not even top 10, but in that range. Give him Ryan Tannehill. I think that he has supreme numbers and someone pays him. And this is why I said I do think he gets paid the $20 million range eventually in the NFL. I'm just not so sure it's by the Steelers. They just drafted George Pickens and Calvin Austin. They still got Chase Claypool, and they could draft another wide receiver real quick. The only way I see, I'll say this and I'll finish. The only way Diontae Johnson stays in my book is A, they find a bridge. He has an okay season. They find a bridge deal to keep him around for another year or two. Or B, he becomes that superstar wide receiver. They franchise tag him, and then they say, okay, we'll either work out a long-term contract or we'll trade you and see what happens.
Okay, I was just gonna this is kind of a two-part question, but who will play in the slot with Juju Smith-Schuster gone now, and what is your impression been of George Pickens so far?
First question, good question. Their first question. I talked to Chase Claypool one-on-one during minicamp, and he told me straight up he's going to be working more in the slot this year. It's something that he wanted to do, but he said because of injuries kind of limited them last year. I think a big part of that was they felt better. This part he didn't tell me. This is just me reading what I saw last year. I think the Steelers felt better about Ray McCloud in the slot and Chase Claypool out wide than Chase Claypool in the slot and James Washington out wide. You may think that's crazy, but that's just the read that I got with the way that they were using those guys. And that's why Ray McCloud was seeing so many targets throughout the season. I think this year, though, they feel like they got their guy in George Pickens. I think that he's going to be the guy that they feel comfortable lining up outside with Diontae Johnson. Those are your two outside guys, and Chase Claypool becomes the big slot. Now, the Steelers, because Matt Canada likes to mix things up, I think they're going to be moving guys around. I also think you're not going to see as many slot type of formations. You're not going to see as many 11 personnel situations where it's one running back, one tight end, and 3 receivers. I think you're going to see a lot more 2 tight end sets with the Steelers this year. Matt Canada talked about how Zach Gentry, he called him a starter, which everyone knows he's not starting over Pat Freiermuth, but I think that they really like the idea of they have 2 big physical tight ends who could go up and get the football, and you pair that with Najee Harris and 2 wide receivers. It gives you a nice athletic rotation that puts the defense in the situation like, hey, we don't know if they're running the ball because they got 2 tight ends in the field with Najee Harris. We also don't know if they're throwing the ball. So keeping them on the run, come on, move, it might not, they're still going to use slot receivers. I'm not saying they're not going to, but I think that who's going to be the slot receiver it's going to be Chase Claypool more often than not, but I think it's not going to be as pronounced as it was with Juju Smith-Schuster just because of the personnel that they have. And then you had a second question. I apologize, Chris.
What's you kind of touched on a little bit, your impressions of George Pickens?
Oh, kid's phenomenal. My biggest worry, the first thing I asked him when I saw him in OTAs was, how's the knee? How are you feeling? Are you, what percentage? He said, I'm 100%. And let me tell you, he 100%. He's going up and getting the football. He's quick. He's explosive. He's going down and getting. He's cutting. He's getting. This dude is quick. He's fast. He does everything you need him to do. The Steelers, I think, got a steal with him in the second round. And I know I'm way too early. We haven't seen a lick of him in action with pads on. And I do think at the end of this season, he's going to need to put on more muscle because he's really, I think he's really thin. But he has all the traits of a wide receiver one. And again, I think if you have a year where he blows up and he becomes your top wide receiver, then you're like, Diontae, that is wide receiver one right there. Like that's the tough situation you're in. So just my read on it, I think George Pickens is a star in the making. I like what I've seen out of him so far. And every person I've talked to has confirmed it. The Steelers like what they see too.
All right. Speaking, you talked about for the tight ends. We have a guy that we affectionately call Penn State Pat. I'm not trying to
It's because he didn't know his last name.
I didn't know his last name. I couldn't pronounce it.
He couldn't pronounce
now
it.
I can. And this was before I started writing for Nittany Sports Now, which is part of the Sports Now family. But question is, how do you feel what his potential could be? You think I think he could be one of the best tight ends in the league.
Absolutely. I think he's on the cusp of it right now, don't you, Brandon?
Yes. And yes, I was on him loved him from day one. And these two can confirm it.
Yeah.
So
no doubt.
Like what do you see in him? How do you think he's going to get better this year? What do you think he's got worked on? How do you, from being a part of Minicamp, what did you see out of him?
Well, I asked him that. I got a one-on-one with him during Minicamp, and he said a lot of it is just getting more detail in his routes, finishing through more of the things that he was starting to do last year. Because one thing that I say this with every rookie, the game comes so fast. The stuff that you learn in OTA and rookie camp and OTAs and Minicamp and training camp, all that stuff, it's great when you get it. But as soon as you get to like that third or fourth game where week in and week out in the NFL, like you get your new playbook each week. You get a new playbook and you got to memorize everything that the other team does and how you got to respond to that and how that interworks with what you do. And when you're starting to learn that as a rookie, it comes so fast. And because you're going 17 games, you start to lose the things that you learned that you added new to your game back in April, May, August, whenever. You start to lose that and you start to get back to it. A perfect example, if you ever want to look at it statistically to help you with it, go back and look at TJ Watt's rookie season. I was there for his rookie training camp at Latrobe. I remember one night at Latrobe Memorial Stadium was the Friday Night Lights practice, and they're working tight ends versus linebackers on pass rushing. And TJ Watt, and I said this about his film at Wisconsin, didn't have a lot of pass rush moves. He used to be a tight end converted to outside linebacker. When he was going up against Xavier Grimble, not a tight end known for blocking, Grimble was giving him a tough time. He couldn't get around him. There was one time they even almost fought. And then afterwards, James Harrison says, 9-0, come here. Brings him over. I don't hear what they say. But I see James Harrison show him the rip move, and he's showing him how to do it. And he's like points, and he says, do that on the next one. I see him look and say, basically, do that on the next one. Next rep, he goes in, uses the rip move, beats Xavier Grimble. That happens. You remember that year, he starts the season with 2 sacks against the Browns, and he started out a house on fire as the year started. But then as the middle of the year came along, his pass rush dissipated. He wasn't as active. Now, he came up with big at the end of the season. He had a big sack on Joe Flacco that basically got them the win over the Ravens in 2017 in a huge divisional game. But you saw as the weeks were going on, the pass rush moves that he learned in the early parts of the season weren't coming back to him naturally. It wasn't until his second year when he showed up to Latrobe and he had been working on those moves that you saw the spin move, the rip move, the swim move. All those different things were in line with what made him great. And now every year, it's like, not only does he have all those moves, now he's figuring out other things. And he's getting stronger. He's getting quicker. He's getting smarter. All those things go into it. So take that back to George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth, all these guys we're talking about, especially Pat Freiermuth. Pat Freiermuth, the stuff we saw last year, which is the glimpse of what he was able to put together in a year's time and while learning what the year of being in the NFL is. Now you take him a step forward. I think you're going to see a lot of those things that we saw glimpses of are going to be solidified in his game, and then we'll see even new parts to it. So I know it's a long way to answer your question, but I think he's heading more than in the right direction.
No, that's a great way with it. And again, I'm gonna talk about this. You know that whenever that tight ends are a huge part of this offense, or are going to be a huge part of it, they had a new tight ends coach, and for the first time ever, I seen a tight end screen, and it was to Kevin Rader in one game, and I was just like, okay, I've seen that in video games, and whenever Travis Kelce does it, it's strange whenever you see the third tight end on the depth chart do it, but that perked my ears up and go, okay, they're gonna do this for Freiermuth very soon. So I'm more interested in seeing the wrinkles of the offense with Canada in its second year, and now firmly without Ben Roethlisberger.
I'm very interested to see that. I think that, I've been one for years saying that, Ben Roethlisberger is a Hall of Fame quarterback, one of the greatest that we've ever seen. But at the same time, in his last few years, extremely limited the Steelers' offense to what they could do. I think you're going to see a lot of things we haven't been used to seeing the Steelers do this year when we start to see this offense open things up.
But now let's talk about the offensive line. Mason Cole has had some time at center, and then of course the new big offensive line acquisition, James Daniels from the Chicago Bears. But first, I want to get your thoughts on the battle for the left guard position. It seems as Kendrick Green has battled for the left guard position with Kevin Dotson.
Yes,
that's kind of a new thing in there. I know that Green was more of an offensive guard at Illinois than a center, but what's the reasoning behind that battle?
Well, for one, I think that they tried a big experiment putting Kendrick Green at center because they didn't really add at the position last year. It didn't work out. I think it was a lot for him to absorb. But I do think that they loved his tenacity and the fact that he could pull and hit people. He just needed to get into a place where he's comfortable. So this year's going to see, hey, can you get comfortable there? Can you do the stuff that we saw you do at Illinois? Because Kendrick Green at Illinois, he was a bulldog. Like he went and blocked. He was very physical. He was nasty, and that's the kind of demeanor they want. But they only got so many guard spots, and he can't be the center. He's not going to be the right guard because James Daniels is a very good dude, and I even have it on good authority. He's already become the leader of the offensive line. But you put him there, Kevin Dotson's, that's his spot. So here's what you do: you got two young dudes, let them battle it out. Let's see how it goes. Kevin Dotson was hurt last year. He never got to really set things up. He also told me straight up, he's like, listen, last year at left guard, I wasn't used to things. There were things in my muscle memory that I was not doing the right way. This year, it's different. I'm more prepared for it, and I'm ready to do it. And I've even talked to both of them about this. I even wrote an article about this on SteelersNow.com at the end of minicamp. They're both saying, hey, it's 50-50. It's professionalism. This is what we're used to. We're not running from it. We're not mad at each other. We're not there's no animosity towards each other. It's, hey, this is professionalism in the NFL. Somebody's got to win the job. We'll see who it is. But at the end of the day, they trust each other to push each other to both show up and make each other be better to actually win the job.
And how is the teachings from the new offensive line coach, Pat Meyer, who, if I'm correct, he came from Minnesota, so Cole was, or no, wait, that was Carolina. Excuse me, Carolina rather. Well, how has Pat Meyer's influence gone into the offensive line, who's going through their third coach in 2 seasons?
I mean, that is a tough one. You've got a lot of turnover there, but I do think Pat Meyer, the element that I've gotten from when I've asked all the offensive linemen, Dan Moore, Chuck Chooks, Kendrick, Mason. Well, Mason wasn't here last year, so he couldn't compare. But also Kevin Dotson and even James Daniels, along with Mason Cole, the new guys. One thing that screams out from Pat Meyer is that he knows he knows how to talk to players of different skill sets. Adrian Clem, when he came in last year, this was sort of an experiment for him. This is a first time thing he had. And, his biggest emphasis was, we're going to be more physical. We're going to be a strong group. We're going to set the tone in games. And that was a good sentiment, but the Steelers didn't do that enough. And I think that was a big struggle that the Steelers had. So now you want that same sentiment. You want to come out and try to be an aggressive group. But now what I've been hearing from Kevin Dotson says, hey, we're a little more technical in how we want to be, aggressive. Now, granted, you can't see this until pads go on, and there's a bit of an itching from them to show this because, right now it's just football and shorts, and you can't really hit anybody or even really give them a good punch. to get that, to see what you're doing. But the footwork is there, the technique is there. And one thing that James Daniels told me, and he's worked with several offensive line coaches, whether it be with the Bears, he said Pat Meyer is one of the best that he's had at communicating to different guys about what they need to do, because you're going to get guys with all these different skill sets and what they need to work on. A good position coach is a guy who can say, hey, Kendrick Green, you're smaller, you're quicker. This is how you win battles. Hey, Kevin Dotson, you're bigger, you're stronger. This is how you win battles. And I think that's where he's helping them do a better job.
Yeah, and Chris, switching to the defensive side of the ball, the big question mark is who will replace Stephon Tuitt. I guess Chris Wormley is kind of like the leader or like the favorite, I guess, to replace him. But there's also Isaiah Loudermilk who gained some weight, some muscle weight, and also DeMarvin Leal. He gained some weight also.
First on the list is Chris Wormley. 7 sacks last year, dealt with some injuries. They like him. They want to give him a shot. Next would be Isaiah Loudermilk. He confirmed to us that he was taking the reps after Wormley for the Steelers defense, and that was solid. But then that's where I think DeMarvin Leal comes in, is after those guys. But here's what I say to that, is that the Steelers are going to operate this, like I said, with how they're operating with running back and how they operate with linebacker at the end of the year. If they feel like Chris Wormley is not the stuffing defensive end that they need to get on that line next to Cam Hayward and Tyson Alualu, and they feel like Loudermilk nor Leal are ready to take hold of that position, I think they go and they get some help for that spot. They might say, hey, Deron Payne, like a guy like that, off a team. And again, just a random name, not guaranteeing they're going to go get him, but just another young player at the end of their rookie deal or just off their rookie deal who has a high potential that another team just can't afford right now. And the Steelers got $21 million in cap space. So Wormley for now, the younger guys after that, and if none of them really show out in training camp, I expect the move to be made by Omar Khan.
Well, what about Sue? Do you think he would be a fit, or do you think he's 35 and he might want a little bit too much money, I guess? What do you think about that with Sue?
Oh, and Dominic, he's just too old. Yeah. If it was the Steelers,
hold up, he's the same age as Alualu, right?
Yeah, right. But Alualu
got drafted the same year,
right? But Alualu knows the team. Like it's different. Like Mike Tomlin even said this last year after Melvin Ingram left. He said this is why they don't offer too many contracts like that to older dudes, because when you're older and you're not part of the organization, it's tough to get you to integrate. Melvin Ingram came in, said all the right things when he got there, but as soon as he saw that Alex Highsmith was beating him out, and he was like, I want more reps. And so he wanted out. And the Steelers, they don't hold hostages. Tyson Alualu has been here for several years. If Tyson Alualu wasn't a Steeler for the past 4 or 5 seasons, or however long he's been with the Steelers, he would not be on the roster right now. But because they know him, they trust him, and they know that he can do the job, that's what it is. So it's a good point by you, Brandon. Yes, Tyson Alualu is also up there, but he's also a guy that they're not risking bringing into the locker room and being a disruptive force. Not a disruptive force, but a guy who doesn't fit in the way that Melvin Ingram didn't fit in. So if Ndamukong Suh was 5 years younger, sure, but at 35 years old, I think that's too old for being a new player that they bring in, unless you're talking about like a kicker or a punter or something.
I want to go back real quick because I think people forget about Wormley. The Steelers have always had this confidence in him. If you remember, when Alualu originally decided to go back to Jacksonville, they immediately signed him to a 2-year deal. So I'm not surprised that they thought that he's at least the defensive tackle, nose tackle, number one of the group. We lost Brandon for a second. He's about to join back.
There we go.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes this happens. But yeah, I'm not really surprised that they have Wormley as the guy, at least for defensive tackle. But who's next? Guys,
Brandon, you got it?
You good? Brandon, you good?
You hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
You see the next question?
All right, cool. All right. Oh, I was getting ready to Chris. All right. Steelers added probably one of rare dips in the free agency. Get a solid player. Miles Jack should be a Pro Bowler, vastly underrated every year. And you got the other middle linebacker. Our favorite person to talk about, Devin Bush. Do you think he has a bounce back year, or do you think he's just a bust?
Well, okay. So before I get my answer, oh man, Brandon disappeared right as soon as he asked that question. I gotta know, because the way he said he's just a bust. That tells me
this man. To give you a little bit of backstory on Brandon, he's a great guy. He's going to join back in here, but he's a part of the Smoking Jim School of Superlatives.
Oh, not Smoking Jim. Oh, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, we had him on the podcast.
Sorry, but did you heard my question?
I did, but my whole thing is that like I heard your question, but I'm sitting here singing like there's a backstory here. Y'all been arguing the way you called him a bust. You didn't say is he a bust? You said he's a bust, and that told me like he's trying to make a point to one of these guys over here. So there's some arguing that y'all been doing about that.
There was no part. There was a
we let him
Twitter,
go.
I had a little Twitter spat disagreement with a family member of Mr. Bush, and you know,
you went after Devin Bush Sr.?
No, the mother, not senior.
Don't argue with the mama. Why are you trying to do that, man? She's just trying to see her son live.
I didn't argue with her. She came after me. She's like, "You're no top 10 pick."
Yeah.
I was like,
but Brandon, I want to let you know that we made sure that we told Christopher that you're a part of the Smoking Jim School of Superlatives.
That's that's pretty funny. I know Jim. He's a good dude. He got a lot of them superlatives. But back to the actual question. I don't think Devin Bush is a bust yet. Has he lived up to it? No. But legitimately, he's had one bad year, one really good year, one year that was looking really good, and then he got hurt. If we're being honest, the reason that he wasn't as good as last year, obviously, he didn't trust himself. He didn't trust his knees. And people are saying, "Oh, he can't read defense. He can't read offenses. He can't diagnose plays." Merrill Hodge saying all that stuff. Well, what was he doing in 2020 when he was, flying all over the place for the Steelers, and they had in their game against Saquon Barkley, they allowed the fewest yards in the history of the NFL to a running back who had 15 carries in a single game. What was he doing when he set the rookie tackle record for the Steelers in 2019 when he came onto the team and was flying all over the place? My whole thing is this. Devin Bush may not recover, but he has had success. There is a reason they drafted him top 10. He is not without that talent. The biggest question is, can he get his legs under him again? Can he believe in himself and be that explosive player that flies around the field and makes those plays? I think he can get back there. I think a big part of it, too, is they need a defensive line that keeps him clean. He cannot be getting hit by guards and centers 2 seconds into a play and have to, shed that way. He has to be able to fly around the field freely. And for people who think that that's something that's unique to Devin Bush, all linebackers need that. Ray Lewis complained as soon as they lost Tony Saragusa and Sam Adams of those early 2000s Ravens defense that Ravens needed to get more help there. Devin Bush, I think, is going to have a chance to show himself this year. And Miles Jack, I think, is a good partner for him to be with him to do that. But the Steelers can't bank on that happen. They have to see it happen, which is why he didn't get his 5th-year option. I don't think that he's going to be a bust. I think that he's going to rebound fine, and you're going to see him and Miles Jack be a very solid linebacker duo this year.
And one thing that I noticed with Bush, but I heard reports that Miles Jack has moved into. Bush is still a starting middle linebacker, but Jack is going to be the new rover linebacker. That's kind of the pass coverage linebacker, and they wanted to put Bush as the, I guess, Vince Williams run support north-south guy. Was that the plan?
They're not settled into any reading into that is a little too much right now. Let's just see how things play out in training camp. I watched the OTAs, and both of these guys were working on pass coverage. Both of these guys were working on run defense. Both of these guys were working on attack angles. They're not settled into any specific roles just yet. Now, maybe that's a prediction that comes true. I'm not saying that it's not, but there's no preset, oh, yeah, Bush, you're this, and Jack, you're that. These guys are going to do different things or eventually. But right now, they're both, hey, you're athletic linebackers. Play sideline to sideline, gap to gap. We need you both to be those kind of filler guys, and also help with coverage. Here's one thing I'll say, why even push back against that even a little bit more. The Steelers love to disguise things. They love to make it so that you don't know exactly what they're doing. So why would they have a situation where every down you come out and you know that Devin Bush is playing the run or Miles Jack is playing the pass? They're going to mix that up as much as they can to make it as tough as it can for quarterbacks to decipher who's doing what and going where each and every play. So I'm not putting any roles on anybody yet. Again, I think Devin Bush is going to have a chance for a really good bounce back year. I think that he can have this bounce back year. I think that Miles Jack is a heck of a linebacker and a great pair. And these two are going to be an athletic duo that kind of reset the linebacker position of the Steelers, something they haven't been able to do since they lost Ryan Shazier.
It'll be interesting to see what kind of impact Brian Flores has on Devin Bush.
Absolutely.
He comes from the Bill Belichick school. He was an understudy of him, and he just Terrell Edmonds described him as like a bulldog and military like. So he won't let Bush slack off. It should be interesting to see if he could help maybe spark and turn his career around maybe.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. You guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Now it's better. Now I had to switch to my phone. My laptop acted up sometimes. I apologize, Chris. I wanted to talk about this, interject about Brian Flores, the new receivers coach, Frisman Jackson. I think they bring a different edge to the Steelers because I've been talking about the Steelers. They could be goofy. They could be goofy sometimes. Goofball antics.
What you mean?
Like it's like something is their intensity, their attitude. Maybe it was the AB era with Ben. Something about their sense of accountability is like all over the place. Team accountability amongst the players. So I'm just thinking, I think Frisman Jackson for the wide receivers could bring some accountability, hard coaching, like tough coaching with Brian Flores. I think that's what they need at this point. I always thought the Steelers, a long-time organization, people like families with old money get stale and complacent and sometimes, and they need that kick. You know what I mean? How do you think that those new coaches help the Steelers get a new thrust?
I think I get what you're asking here.
I know
Brandon.
it's a lot, but
No, I think I get what you're asking. For one, for me, Brian Flores, some people call him a bulldog. I thought the best translation of what he brought so far came from Miles Jack when I talked to him one-on-one. And the way he described Brian Flores is that he says either you're right or you're wrong. You're not some of the way right. You're not some of the way wrong. You are either all the way right or all the way wrong when you're doing an assignment. And I think that's when you hear the militaristic and the stuff. It's you better get what I'm telling you or you are in the wrong and you got to do this again. And I think that's where Brian Flores is doing it. And also being a head coach has helps him communicate, hey, you may think that this role here is so minute that you doing this one thing in this defensive scheme is very small. And that if you miss it a little bit, it's okay because there's other people doing things. But he's the guy that can communicate and says, listen, no, what you do, this little role, you may think that just you getting in this guy's face right here is just something that if you don't do, it's okay. It is crucial because it feeds off of every other thing. And that's something that Miles Jack is explaining to me from macro to micro or micro to macro. Position coaches are the guys that they bring their group together. They work on specific things. They say, these are the techniques you need to learn. This is the schemes, these are the assignments you need to do these well. Then the coordinators work with all the position coaches to bring all those things, every little minute detail, and then coordinate them into this is the best plan of attack that we have for offense, defense, special teams, whatever. And when you go through those position coaches and you're seeing them do those things, it is rare to find a position coach like Brian Flores and what he's going to be this year, even though he's officially a senior defensive assistant. It is rare to find a guy who can say that and then on the back end, understand all the things to communicate and make this the macro of being position coach to coordinator to head coach. That is where I think the biggest advantage that you're going to get from Brian Flores is that, and you're hearing it from Devin Bush, you're hearing it from Miles Jack, you're even hearing it from like Alex Highsmith, TJ Watt, even the cornerbacks are talking about him like that. Terrell Edmonds saying those type of things. He's getting to everybody and everybody's feeling it. I think there's a lot of excitement for that. Frisman Jackson, I think the biggest thing is that you're going to see him deal with receivers, I think, a little more personally than Ike Hilliard did. I think Ike Hilliard had a more standoffish approach. He wanted to let you kind of prove yourself in your own space. At least from what I got the sense of when I talked to the receivers about Frisman Jackson, he challenges you every single play. I do think there is an old school mentality to what Brandon's saying about the way that Frisman Jackson coaches. But But I also don't think it's necessary to always have the same approach for coaches. I think it's important to have different dynamics. The biggest thing is, can you connect with your players? You can be Bill Cowher and yell and spit and put chin out and do all that. But if you don't communicate, if you're not connecting with your players and they're not hearing your message, it doesn't matter. Tony Dungy never raised his voice. You didn't see him be animated, but one of the greatest coaches of all time. It's all about dynamics and how these guys connect. I think Brian Flores is doing a heck of a job connecting early. And from what I hear, Frisman Jackson, Pat Meyer on the same track.
And now let's talk about the big thing on here. I guess Twitter's, you mentioned it earlier today on your Twitter. Today's best thing to do is to kind of doubt TJ Watt. And it's kind of crazy to do that. 72 sacks and 77 career games, but there's consistently a talk of him just being, well, people think less of him. They want to give it to Myles Garrett and stuff like that. But this is a guy on a Hall of Fame trajectory. Why are people like this?
It's a lot like what my colleague Alan Saunders at SteelersNow.com said. A lot of it is, they know Steelers fans are going to react. They know that Steelers fans are going to get upset, and that's going to get more clicks, and that's going to get more fired up, and then you're going to hear more PFF or sports information or whatever the heck comes out and says that Trey Hendrickson's a better defender than TJ Watt or something like that. You're gonna get more reactions that way by ticking off one of the biggest fan bases in the NFL. But I think that's a big part of it. But also, when you become one of the better players, you get more attacked. You get attacked more, especially if you're on a franchise that a lot of people don't like, and a lot of people don't like the Steelers because they've won a whole lot. Aaron Donald. I think people push back against him because he's with the Rams, and the Rams just won the Super Bowl, but they haven't been a force that's crushed NFL teams for decades. The Steelers owned the AFC North for a long time. They still have the most division titles when it comes to that. The Steelers have been a factor in the AFC playoffs for the past 30 years. If they're out of the playoffs one year, they're usually at least back in the hunt the next. They've been that consistent thorn of team's side. I think the Rams have become that in the last few years under Sean McVay, but they were on and off for the longest time before then. They were really bad for a while under Jeff Fisher. They had the greatest show on turf back in the early 2000s, but they don't have that. So I think that there's a bit of pushing back because of the Steelers' legacy. I think anyone that tries to say that TJ Watt isn't, the premier edge defender in the NFL is fooling themselves, or they're trying to sell you something, or they're trying to get you to click on something.
It's kind of a two-part question, but how's the cornerback how's the depth chart? I guess is Levi Wallace and Ahkello Witherspoon, are they going to be on the outside, and is Cam Sutton going to be in the slot? And do you think Witherspoon can send into a true number one cornerback? He has a really nice measurables, like his height, size, and everything, his arm length. Should be. I think recently he said on the Terrell Owens podcast, or the podcast with Terrell Owens, that he believes he's a top 5 cornerback in the league. I mean, I know he hasn't played much really, but he is I think it was kind of like a swagger type thing, but he's 27. He's like entering that prime part of his career.
No, I mean, I think Ahkello Witherspoon put up a great sample size last year, or great within his sample size. I think he needs to do more. I think he needs to be consistent this year, and that's been his big problem in his career. I think he has the potential. I think he has the way that I saw him play in the later part of the season for the Steelers. I liked it. I was like, that's the kind of cornerback play you want to see out of anybody. If I'm a GM, I'm like, hey, I might be calling that guy up. But he's got to do it consistently, and that's a challenge. That's not something that's just going to come right away. So I think Ahkello Witherspoon has potential there. Levi Wallace, I think he was an underrated pickup for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'll say right now, Cam Sutton is still going to play in a bit of an outside role, but I do see in the long run, I do think it's going to be Witherspoon, Wallace, Sutton on the inside, with your occasional helping of Arthur Mollett and Trey Norwood flowing around. But I also think that the Steelers, they're going to want to mix in each of these guys into the slot at some point, because like I said, they want to force quarterbacks to guess. They don't want you just if I'm a quarterback and I see, okay, Cam Sutton, Ahkello Witherspoon, Levi Wallace. Okay, so Cam Sutton's going to be in the middle, so wherever he's at, I know that he's going there. But you come on the line, wait, Levi Wallace is here? Crap, he's a little bit longer. Okay, we got to worry about him. Witherspoon's over here? Oh, man, the same thing with Devin Bush and Miles Jack and anywhere else, and Trey Norwood or Minkah Fitzpatrick. You want to have as much disguises, as much unpredictability as possible while producing that chaos. And I think that that's what Terrell Austin's going to try to do. So I do see Witherspoon at CB1. I think Sutton is kind of CB2, but he's CB2 that will jump to the slot to let Levi Wallace come in there and play on the outside more often. And then we'll just see how things play out. I think it's going to be very interesting to see when the pads go on, who does what, and can Witherspoon be consistent in his production from last year, or will someone overtake him? But I think those guys are going to be very interested to see how they play out of the top three.
All right. Speaking of that, last year, TJ Watt held out. Got his money, highest paid safety in the NFL, well, held in. You have a situation coming up here, too, with a high-paid safety, Minkah Fitzpatrick. I think he's one of the best in the league. I don't care what them PFF numbers say, because we argued about that all last year. Do you think he'll hold in, and how much do you think he's worth?
I mean, his hold in is going to be. It's the Steelers aren't concerned. I'll tell you this. We asked a lot of the players. They're like, Minkah's fine. And I'll let you know, he was doing the warm-up drills with the Steelers. He was doing, the position drills and the individuals and stuff. It wasn't like he was just sitting there saying, no, I'm not going to. He was at minicamp. He was doing the things. He just, when it came to team stuff, he sat back and, players were talking about how he was more of an advisory role at that point in time. The Steelers know that what they get out of Minkah Fitzpatrick. They don't need to see him right now. They need him to be fresh and ready to go. From what I understand, it's a formality at this point. His contract is going to be done when it gets done. It's going to be like, it was a formality for TJ Watt last year. They were perfectly fine with TJ Watt sitting out through all those training camp practices and letting him rest up and just work on what he needed to work on. He's not the piece that the Steelers needed to see improve the most last year. Same thing with Fitzpatrick this year. I think it's a story, but it's a non-story. It's not something that I think is going to be a really sweated out situation. The Steelers are going to pay him, maybe around the similar time with TJ Watt last year. They're going to make a nice ceremony out of it because they really like Minkah. They see him as a leader for the next 5 or 6 years. He'll get paid. I think he'll get paid around $18 million a year. I think he'll get paid a really big payday and reset the safety market. And I think it's important for them to do that before other safeties start to do that are around his age. But yeah, no doubt in my mind, it gets done with Minkah Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, Chris, last year you were saying Justin Simmons money for Minkah? Chris Ward, not you. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think the latest was the highest paid Jamal Adams now, I think. They think $17.5 million per year, so I think probably in that range we'd be looking for.
Looking at numbers here, Justin Simmons, at least right now, just per year, again, this isn't exactly what he makes every year. It's just per year average of what he's got. Hold on one second.
Sorry if you guys are catching something off of my mic out there. It's just like one of my baby cousins out there having fun.
No, you're fine. I just someone was calling my Google voicemail line for the Locked On Steelers podcast. But what was I saying? Oh yes. If you look at the numbers average per year, again, this is not what they exactly make in their salary cap here because that's always spread around. But average per year, Justin Simmons is like $15.25 million. The highest paid safety right now is 17.5, and that's Jamal Adams. Minkah's going to make, I think, 18. They're going to give him the new highest number, but it's important for them to do that because Jesse Bates is coming up around the corner. You're 25 years old. You want to beat that crew. You want to beat that crew to the punch. So yeah, I say 18 and a half per year for 5 years, around that average, that range. He's going to get paid, but again, you can do this when you're not paying Ben Roethlisberger, franchise quarterback money. And I think that especially with the rising salary cap, they're going to be able to pull this off, no problem.
All right, guys, you got anything else you want to talk about?
Greg, you got anything?
Not really, but thank you for coming on. Sorry about the.
Yeah. It happens, man. But that's Chris Carter, host of the Locked On Steelers podcast and a writer for Steelers Now. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me, fellas.
And that'll be all for us. For Chris Ward and Brandon Walker, I'm Ty Polk. Thank you for tuning in to the Renegade Blitz. And of course, thank you for watching us on Twitter.
Thank you for listening to the Renegade Blitz podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, at our Blitz Pod, and @BlitzVideos. Read articles on RenegadeBlitz.com. Like us on Facebook and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app. The Renegade Blitz podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and wherever else you can listen to podcasts.